Greetings. Glad that you can be with me today. I'm Steve Cole, the pastor of the First Methodist Church in Oswego, Kansas, as well as the West Mineral Church in West Mineral, Kansas. Today we're going to be looking at a sermon for January 15th, 2023. The Bible tells us the story about the life of Jesus and starts out with his birth and how that all took place, and then the wise men come and they're told to take off and go to Egypt. So they go to Egypt, and then we skip. They go back to Nazareth. They skip 12 years. What happens between the time that Jesus was born and 12 years? We really don't know. And then it has a brief little stopping point there, and then it jumps again to when Jesus is about 30 years old and starts his ministry. And of course goes through his time with his disciples, about 3.5 years, and of course then the death, burial, resurrection, and all that. So today we're going to be looking at one of those parts of all that, is when Jesus was 12 years old and what took place at that particular time. In Luke chapter 2, verses 41 to 52. Now, every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival had ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. But his parents were unaware of this. Assuming that he was with a group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among the relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw this, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously looking for you." And he said to them, "Why were you not searching for me? Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he had said to them. Then he went down with them, came to Nazareth, and was obedient to them, and his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom, in years, and in divine and human favor. May God add a blessing to the reading, the hearing, and the understanding of his word. Well, here we're told when Jesus is 12 years old, the family makes a trip to Jerusalem for the Passover celebration. Told that they do that every year. Now, that may not seem like that big of a deal, except that it's a 90-mile trip from Nazareth to Jerusalem. That's not an easy task. It's about a 3 or 4 day journey over some rugged terrain. So they didn't have cars or anything to make it an easy trip. So that tells us something about Mary and Joseph, that they were devout Jewish people that wanted to observe the religious rituals of the faith. They weren't required to go on a yearly basis. Now, those that lived closer, maybe, but those that lived farther away like that didn't have to go every year. They were expected to go once in a while. But they made the trip, we're told, every year. Now, here in the United Methodist Church, we have a thing called annual conference. And it's a yearly business meeting that we make a lot of decisions and do things. And we as pastors are required to go to this yearly meeting. And sometimes it's held in some places in Nebraska. It's a little bit of a trek for me. It's about a 7-hour drive sometimes to get to where this meeting's going to be in Nebraska. But I have to make it the trip because I'm required to go. Some churches may send a lay delegate to that conference. They don't have to, but they may do that. So, and I've been to the annual conference now for several years. Only missed one year I did not go. But most of the time I've been there. It's not, and there's some people that's I think the highlight of their year. Not so much for me. Meetings and things like that are not something I get a big kick out of, but there's some people that really enjoy it. The difference between Mary and Joseph and me is that they didn't have to go. They wanted to go. I have to go, not so much because I want to. A lot of people make an annual trip or go on a vacation or whatever, and it's kind of a yearly thing that they do. Now, some people go to the same place year after year after year. They love to do it, or they go on a cruise or something like that. It's just something they do, and then other people want to mix it up. They go to a different place every year, try something new and different. Okay, it's part of their routine, we might say. And from Joseph and Mary, they went to Passover every year. But it was a religious observation that they went. Now, how many of us would go on an extended trip for something like a religious or spiritual experience? Now, somebody might go to the Holy Land. That's a pretty good trek to get to Israel and see all the things there. But usually that's kind of a once in a lifetime, or they might not do it wouldn't do it every year. But lots of people have gone. That's something that they might do, but to do something. And sometimes pastors go on what we call spiritual retreats, where they go off and try to rejuvenate themselves. And that's pastors. But what about lay people? Are there really that many lay people that would go on a spiritual retreat somewhere? I don't know. They might go somewhere to see one of their favorite preachers, just go on a trip, but combine that with maybe something else at the same time. They might want to see somebody that they've watched on TV, but they'll probably combine that with something else. That might not be the only reason they show up. Or somebody might go to something like Eureka Springs to the Passion Play or something like that. So they, once in a while we might go to something. And back when Billy Graham was still preaching, people more than likely sometimes would travel a fair distance just to go see Billy Graham in person. So yeah, it happens. And of course we have certain observances that we have, Christmas and Easter, and sometimes people travel on Christmas a fair distance, but more to see family than really for it to be a religious observance. Although I saw something one time where there's in Ethiopia, there's a church in Ethiopia where people travel a fair distance, maybe 2, 3, 4 days on foot, to be at this particular church in Ethiopia for Christmas Eve. It's a special thing. So it's not unheard of that some people might actually do that. And a lot of people go on their yearly vacation to take the children along for the experience, so that they can learn something, so they can see Mount Rushmore, or they can experience Yellowstone, or New York City, or wherever they want to go. They want their children to experience that. And Joseph and Mary take Jesus to the Passover. He's 12 years old. Time to be exposed to some of these things, and so they take him along. We don't know. Maybe they took him every year. Who knows? But somewhere along the way, they lose track of him. And we kind of wonder how that could happen. They take off and leave Jerusalem, and Jesus isn't with them, and they just take off and head back home. And after they traveled for a day, they go, "Where's Jesus?" Well, they may have thought, I'm sure that they weren't the only ones traveling. There was probably a group of people that possibly even from Nazareth that were traveling together as a group, and the women probably all stayed together in their little group, and the men in another little group, and maybe the younger people kind of traveled in a little group together too. And so, Mary and Joseph thought, well, he's, in one of these other groups of people. And then when they stopped for the evening to camp out, where's Jesus? Nowhere to be found. So they hightail it back to Jerusalem, and look, and it tells us 3 days they looked for him in Jerusalem. And you can imagine how they must have felt. Goodness gracious. You know, sometimes we lose track of one of our children for just a few minutes. We get scared and we're apprehensive and anxious, and where could they be? I know I kind of lost track of my son. We were at the state fair, and only about 20 minutes. Couldn't find him, but you know, those 20 minutes, pretty, yeah. So I can imagine 3 days not knowing where he's at. It was probably pretty scary. And they said that they were anxious when they finally found him. Yeah. And they find him in, we might say, the last place they looked. Isn't that how we go? We always say, we found something in the last place we looked. Well, of course, we quit looking after we found it, don't we? But, yeah, they looked every place else. He said, didn't you know that I'd be in my Father's house? Yeah. He didn't think it was that unusual for him to be in the temple, but, oh well. Yeah, and we lose track of things all the time, don't we? Our keys, our cell phones. We parked in a big parking lot or someplace, and we forget where we exactly parked, and we have a hard time finding our car. I've been there, done that. But do you ever lose track of Jesus? How do you lose track of Jesus? You know, we get involved with everyday life. We doing things. We get busy here and there. And we maybe just kind of lose track of Jesus. We don't think about Jesus. We don't think about praying. We don't think about reading the Bible or doing our devotions, or maybe even going to church for that matter. We're just too busy. Got too many other things to do. And so Jesus kind of gets pushed to the wayside, we might say. And eventually, where did he go? Thought he was right here. Well, the thing is, did he go anywhere? Does he go anywhere? Maybe it's not Jesus that leaves us, right? Well, and we don't have to make a major trip somewhere to find Jesus. We don't have to go on a long spiritual journey to find Jesus. We don't even have to go to the Holy Land or a spiritual retreat or whatever. No. All you got to do is pray. Say, Jesus, I'm lost track of you. I want you to come back and be part of my life and be involved. And, Jesus will be there. He didn't really go anywhere. But we may have lost track of him. Well, Mary and Joseph found Jesus where? In the temple. He said, didn't you know I'd be in my Father's house? The temple is a place to worship God. And so what is that for us? The church. Seems like a logical place. But if we need to find Jesus, wouldn't that be the best place to go, is to go to the church and find Jesus? And maybe, just maybe, that would happen. And then there's lots of opportunities for that. And you look around, we don't have to go very far. In any town of any size, anywhere, there's usually at least one church, if not several churches to choose from. So you'd think with all these churches, people would not have any trouble finding Jesus. But maybe they're not looking for Jesus. That he's there, if they're wanting, they're looking, he's there. But maybe they're not necessarily looking. Yeah. In that case, it's not Jesus that is lost, is it? Jesus said, I have come to seek and to save the lost, right? It's not Jesus that is lost, it is we that are, the people that are, lost. So, okay. They didn't find Jesus. They didn't really go to find him in a church. Where else could somebody possibly find Jesus if not at the church? Well, there's another temple, we might say. We're told that our body, we as believers, are the temple of God. Because Jesus lives in us, right? So we are the temple. So might people possibly find Jesus in us? I wonder, could that be? Did they find Jesus in his followers? You know, people can find Jesus in lots of different ways. They can find Jesus, like I said, in a church. They might find Jesus by opening up a Bible and reading a Bible. Could be possible. Or they might be flipping through the channels on TV and come across a TV preacher, and something that TV preacher says hits, and they find Jesus. Could be. Or they're just out and about, and somebody's there on the street corner, and they hand them a little tract, little pamphlet, whatever, and they read it, and hey, I never thought about that. They find Jesus. Maybe. I mean, these are all possibilities. But maybe, and this is what studies have pretty well shown, is the most often times the way somebody finds Jesus is through a friend or a family member. Somebody they already know, not a stranger that has walked up to them and said, "Do you know the Lord?" Not because somebody knocked on their door and started talking to them. No, it's usually through a friend or a family member. Somebody they already know, somebody they already trust. And somehow the conversation, maybe not forced, but comes around to their faith in Jesus. That's how most people find out about Jesus, is through other people they know, other people they trust. That's how they find Jesus, through that temple, because that's where he's at, right? That's where Joseph and Mary found Jesus, was in the temple. Is that where somebody's going to find Jesus in us being the temple of God? Oh, well. Gives us something to think about where Jesus might be. And is he lost? If we lose track of him? Yeah, well, probably we all do, probably at one time or another in our life. Maybe not for an extended period of time, but once in a while we get busy with life and do things. So. But we can always come back. That's the good thing. Is he said, "I will never leave you or forsake you." He's always there. All we have to do is go to him in prayer. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me blither on about these things, and hope that this might have been a blessing to you as well. And now may we go knowing that God is with us to guide us, lead us, and help us today and every day. Amen.